Hello, I'm pleased to introduce today our speaker, Dr. Eileen Cullen. Eileen Cullen, Professor and Chair of Plant Science at Cal Poly Pomona, will cover the essentials of soil-free growing, from nutrient solutions to selecting suitable crops, and offer practical tips for setting up your own indoor or urban garden. She'll also discuss pest management, microbial food safety, and highlight student projects from Cal Poly Pomona's greenhouse and controlled environment agriculture programs.
I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. So nice to be here. I've heard, I've made the acquaintance of Rachel and David, and I've heard such wonderful things as well from my close colleague, Dr. Erin Fox. So it's my honor to be here with our students. And also, I've been at Cal Poly Pomona now. Before we start, I should stand here. Is this the best for the people on Zoom? Okay, thanks, Carly. So I've been at Cal Poly Pomona for 11 years, and this is my third year as department chair. And as department chair, I just want to thank you all for your generosity to our students. I was just so happy to hear from all of you. And Jorge, what did you bring from your food forest today? Jackfruit. Jackfruit? Oh, lovely. Fruit cuttings as well. So I'll be sure not to talk too terribly long, right? So that we won't get, so we can still partake in that. With chat, questions and stuff. Okay. Well, thank you. So I'm an entomologist. I'm from Minnesota, Minneapolis. I'm not from a farm, but I've worked in agriculture since I was a college student. And I thought I would sample today. Oh, I was going to say too, I really love working at Cal Poly Pomona. I came here, my husband and I moved back to California, in large part because of this job. I was an extension entomologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for corn and soybeans and wheat and alfalfa and sweet corn, and I really loved it. But the opportunity to come and be part of a plant science department has really been a joy. So I love that we're all here for plants and we all come from different entry points. So we've got our entomologists, our plant pathologists, and of course, you have so much knowledge here. I don't have any experience with growing rare fruits. So I thought what I would do is just, I was thinking about this, and one question maybe we can talk about as we go. I'm not familiar with any rare fruits that would be grown hydroponically, but I'm certain I could be wrong, and I'm certain I don't know. So it'll be fun to kind of talk about some of the systems and be creative and think. I think what might we be able to adapt to these types of systems. I always like to just give a little overview of what I'll like to share. And I kind of took this or grafted this from some of the classes that we teach, just a little hydroponics 101. We're probably not all at the 101. Does anyone grow hydroponically? There's probably quite a bit of experts here. So I would guess that. Yes, yes. And then I wanted to just touch on passive and active systems. Active systems are also called dynamic systems, just to give a couple examples of each, or one example of each. Some hydroponic do's and don'ts. I thought we could look and consider the differences between growing in soil and growing without soil. And then as you see, sanitize is very important for pest management. It's just a lot of our, plant material and sanitizing, but also for food safety. So that's, just a little word on that. And then I thought we could talk about pest management, being an entomologist, and just share experiences or dilemmas or questions. Jessica, I was really thrilled and interested that you were thinking of vertebrate pest control and rodent pest control. That's a really unique perspective. So that's great. And then I'll end with some of our students. I want to show you where are they now? So 2 students that have worked at Cal Poly Pomona on their master's degrees, as Jorge was speaking of a master's degree, and where they are now. So I always like hydroponics because hydro being water and ponos means, so hydro is water and ponos is, I don't know, would anyone know if it's a Greek root word, or I think it might be Greek. I'm not sure if it's Greek or Latin, but water and labor. So water working, hydroponics. And as you know, and as we're probably familiar, it's those roots in contact with a nutrient dense, a nutrient a circulating solution. A lot of people will call it a recipe, a hydroponic recipe. And the roots, as we know, they still need oxygen. So, I mean, to non-plant people, we're all plant people here, but I always like to think about like non-plant people. Wait, what? You can just like put roots in water and they still get oxygen, and you can get fruits or vegetables that are fruits or leafy greens. So, hydroponics has been, I think, gained a lot of attention. And I think a big thing is the terms that we're hearing, like the USDA has an Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production, is what they call it, because they're trying to capture all of these things. And hydroponics is a relatively new science, but it's over 70 years old, and it's a practice. So, and one of the things that I like to touch on is that it is soil less. And there are some systems that are literally water and roots, but a lot of times there's an inert media, something that does not provide nutrients to the plants. It provides structure. And you can see they can be clay pellets, they can be rock wool. I'll show you some pictures of some things our students produced in one of our horticulture classes, where the roots are just in a little basket. There's actually no in a static system, and they're coming into the water. So I think if you're, forgive me if this is all old hat, but if you're new to this and it's nice to leave the room tonight and say, well, yes, it is soil less, but those roots still have some structure. There's this inert media, and it does not provide any nutrients. So, some of the slides I'll just kind of click through, but we see often it's kind of interesting, even in what you'll see in a moment. And in this slide, you see a little bit of it. Looks like a radish. We didn't grow that in our class, but what strikes me is something that we see often in our greenhouse is those really fresh, white, kind of fresh roots. And, it's a function of having that nutrient dense water, having oxygen availability to the plant, and keeping light out to a degree that we don't have algae growth. And it's always surprising that they can be in there for quite a long time with a nutrient recipe and electrical conductivity, nutrient salts dissolved in that water. And weeks later, you can still be bigger, but they'll still be a nice clean root when you're doing, when you have a good system. So this I just pulled off of Amazon. So it seems like just a picture. Inert media, I think one of the common ones that we see a lot is rock wool. And there's kind of the pros and cons. Rock wool, I'll touch on the cons, I'll kind of end with those. But this is a very common inert ingredient. We use at Cal Poly Pomona, and maybe you can help me with this. It's like what is it called? It's like ooh, it's escaping me. It's green and it's a little cube. I'll look it up, but it's not rock wool. It's like, I want to say, it's like that. It's kind of like that sponge. Oh, it's made. Oh, thank you. It's the Oasis cubes. And is that made from polyurethane? Okay. Yeah, the Oasis cubes, which are not rock wool, but we use that at Cal Poly Pomona. Thank you, the Oasis. I was thinking of that. What we have here is, rock wool. And then I won't dwell on this, but it is a popular growing medium. Now, in a moment, the things we want to be aware of is that reusing the rock wool can be very difficult. It can harbor diseases, plant pathogens that have already been picked up in the system. And if you think about places in the Netherlands or places, where there's a large volume, large scale hydroponics, that's a lot of material that if it's not being reused, there are some, I have a video I can share, and it's actually in these slides. You could look it up, you'll see it, but about how that can be recycled. So it's a helpful thing. It's a very popular inert medium. It was once used as insulation, and it was later adapted for plant production in Northern Europe. And it does come from, even though that last picture didn't really quite look like it on Amazon page there, but it's natural basalt rock. And it's melted and spun and mixed with at very high temperatures, a little bit of chalk, and then they can mold it into these different shapes. You'll often see this, we'll talk about this in a minute, but this is an active system. So I'd love you to look at this, and it's a form of a nutrient film technique, or NFT. And when I say active, what I wanted to focus on was just the rock wool there. So you can see, but active, there's a pump involved, and there's I'll show you another picture of that. But let's focus on that rock wool use. It's in the so-called gutter or trough, this channel. We probably can't see it as well from this angle, but I have another photo where NFTs, people will just throw that acronym around, a nutrient film technique. They'll be at a sort of a slant. And if it's a quiet day in the greenhouse and you walk in and you'll hear the trickle of the water kind of going at that slant, and then it'll be coming back up to pumped up and back into the sump, the tank that has the nutrient recipe, and then that'll be continually recycled. And that also will be dosed. These systems will have at the sump, depending on your scale of production. I definitely want to learn from people here. But often even in our greenhouse at Cal Poly Pomona, there will be doses of the recipe, the nutrient mix that we've put for the particular crop. And so periodically that will come into the flow and into the sump and just kind of come back to the sump. So just showing there some rock wool. This is not our system, by the way. This is just a photo that I found. And it's got the plastic to prevent algae growth and keep those roots, just keep the sunshine and the light from coming in, or I guess the light in the greenhouse. So there is a little YouTube link down there, but I could always, I think it's interesting. I can send it by email. It does show a recycling program in the Netherlands where they produce, a lot of indoor growing hydroponically, and they have a ton, well, I don't want to say a ton, but maybe a ton. They have lots and lots of rock wool that, what do you do with it? So it is, often, and it is in large part, there are these elements of efficiency and environmental, but it really depends on, you could, if you're working in a greenhouse or a controlled environment agriculture, it does have the electricity to keep the active system running with the water circulation. But then also, we don't want to necessarily be producing things that are not easily recyclable. And it may not be as much of an issue at a small scale. But anyway, I'll try to get that link to you in a more user-friendly form. It was very interesting to see massive amounts of rock wool and what they're trying to do to recycle. So I just wanted to touch on passive systems. Passive just means there's no motor or a pump. It's a passive system. It's still. And this is what we have done at Cal Poly Pomona in one of our classes in particular, Plant Science 1 and some other things. We're going to change the name of Plant Science 1 because that's not very, right? We have to change that name. So but it's one of our basic horticulture classes. So this is what's often called, it was, as you may know, developed by a person by the name of Kratky, the Kratky method. And it's an open system. So the nutrients, so basically it's a static system. As I said, it doesn't use any pump. There's no circulation of the nutrient solution. It looks clear, but that does have a recipe there. And those roots are getting basically the 14, elements that they need. And you can see the beauty of that. They're quite nice. This was, at Cal Poly Pomona, we'll have these baskets and we'll germinate the seeds in an oasis cube. Thank you so much. The oasis cube, little seed, and then it'll germinate. And then students and the professors will put that oasis cube with the sprouted or the germinating seed in the basket. The roots grow down. We've got the foam over the top to keep sunlight from coming in. And then we have the leaves coming up. You can see here, this is probably a varietal, obviously, of a lettuce type. It's an open system. So the nutrient solution is never recovered in an open system. This is actually, or there's a closed system where the nutrient solution is used for as long as it has the right chemical properties to feed the plant. So this would be a closed system. We set it up and we monitor it. And then just what we'll do is we may top off the water a bit. We'll still take measurements for electrical conductivity. But we usually have not been changing the recipe. We'll just kind of top off the water, and it's pretty self-sufficient. On the next slide, I used to have, I think I just, okay, good. This is Christina Ciranda, one of our graduated about around 2018 with a bachelor's from Cal Poly Pomona Plant Science. And I have this, oh, I'm sorry, I knew I did that. So I had a picture of, I don't know, Mr. or Dr. Kratky, who came up with this passive system. And then just today at the office, I said, let me put Christina there. So this is one of our classes, and you can see it is, we have these boxes. I'm sorry, you can't see the box, but you see that little bit of wood there? It was treated with polyurethane. And so just to kind of keep it from getting too soggy. And then it's just a foam with a foil on top. We had a pretty basic, recipe. I think it was like a Peter's solution. We had, the recipe, and then we have some various basil, a curly basil, and then, sorry, I know, yeah. So two different kinds, I think, and this one was a nice one because it had that wrinkly leaf. Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. So she looks so happy. So that was really nice, but that was amazing. Everyone got a box, set it up, and would come in on the weekly, and we check on them, but all we really did was top off the water and then harvest. When they die, it's because that water has probably gotten out of contact with the root zone. So sometimes I'll come in but that's a great learning experience too, to see some of the baskets flourishing and then one or two not as well. So just wanted to mention that there are also dynamic or active systems. And a great example of that is the classic NFT gutter system. And there's that tilt. So on the left, on our right, we're seeing that you have the air pump, and this is just very drawing, but there's usually in these systems, like what we have used at Cal Poly Pomona, there's what they call, a sump, and it's a tank that has the nutrients, and then it's going to be recycling. And so, I just wanted to bring that up because NFTs are often seen a lot, and they can be configured different ways, both horizontally and vertically. And, NFT systems is one, and aeroponics, where the roots are within a structure and they're being misted with a nutrient solution. These can be grown in a greenhouse, which is protected agriculture, indoor agriculture, a greenhouse. But they can also be grown in controlled environment systems, which are, say, a shipping container or that type of thing. So the hydroponics can be in different places. We could also do, and then this will be on, I believe, as you said, on YouTube, but I just wanted to kind of say that the nutrient flow is pulsed. And so those roots do need to be constantly bathed with it. And the bad thing is if the pump goes out, or the electricity goes down, then you can get your dry roots. And right, you also have to be managing the conditions in the greenhouse. At Cal Poly Pomona right now, it's amazing, wonderful, but we're actually in the bidding process to get new shade cloth, insect screening, and new cooling pads. And so until that happens, we've had a lot of heat in our greenhouses. So in that recent heat wave we've been having, we just had to have, pretty much we couldn't go in there. It was just too hot. So you think about a system that needs the electricity to keep circulating, keep everything going, but then, so that's a sort of a drawback that can happen versus the static types of systems that are more, they're not contingent, dependent on that circulation of the, active system. It's kind of small print, but I just want to pick out the cons of an NFT. So one could go really deep into this. I don't know if anyone's ever participated in Arizona State University. They have the Center for Environmental Controlled Ag, SEAC, and they hold a workshop every February. People go there from all around, the world, probably in the US. And they go deep into all of these. So you can go into any number of systems, the ebb and flow system, the deep water culture. There's a variety of types of both passive and active systems. And I just pulled one little example of how we can examine them. We can say, yes, there's many variations. Just here is the nutrient film technique. The cons, the plants are continuously fed water and nutrients, and they may be overly succulent with limited shelf life. So it takes a lot of horticultural knowledge about getting that to either their market or, if it's needing to be even locally transported in a local market. So just some things that the plants will respond to in such a nutrient-rich situation. So that is one of the reasons that the nutrients are pulsed to kind of harden off the plants. And then I just wanted to touch on both this scale and the small scale of what was lovingly called sort of the Beto bucket. This is an active system, even though at first it kind of doesn't look like an active system, but it's just a nice thing to point out that you can have, it's very known, you can have leafy greens, dense, nutrient-dense leafy greens, but you can also have vining crops. So tomatoes and peppers work pretty well. I've seen people grow eggplants as well, but vining crops do well in the Beto bucket. They're small media beds. They may have an inert media inside. They're buckets, like it says. You want to be sure, of course, to use something that is food grade or acceptable. We'd have to do some research on that to make sure that it's not just your average bucket we'd get at Home Depot, like a 5-gallon bucket. But in place, this is, throughout this, it's just that idea that making, finding spaces to grow crops in non-arable areas. And there's always a debate about, you can do this in like where I'm from in Minnesota in the winter, or, how does it make a lot of sense to do this in, think about lettuce growing in Yuma, Arizona. And yet there's also a lot of controlled environment, this type of lettuce production. So that's a whole area that people discuss, like which is better, which is more sustainable. And the Beto bucket can also be done on a small scale. And so you can see you can have a simple pump and it has like a drip line, and you can run that up from your reserve that has the nutrient solution. And this you can see is not at a tilt, like the NFT is a channel to circulate and pulse the nutrients on that downflow of the water, but it has a drip emitter. So I really liked this picture, especially the one on the left, because you can see, it's nice to see that, like, I haven't tried this, but I'm trying to find more, time to do these kind of things. I do a lot of weeding in my garden, but yeah, so I like that picture. You see different things growing there, some kale and other things. On the left is a picture from Cal Poly Pomona. It's when we've had a full greenhouse growing hydroponic NFT lettuce. So we can talk the language, right? Like, this is NFT, it's an active system. We don't have that set up right now. But also, oh, look, you can see our shade cloths are kind of raggedy. So we're really excited to be getting a new shade. They're expensive shade cloths, and we haven't been whitewashing the roofs. So, but this is just to point out, you can also have vertical. You can have different configurations of NFT. It doesn't just have to be horizontal like that. So that's, you hear about this, look at Disney and Epcot and things like that. So a lot of ways you can do it. I'll just kind of end this section. Okay, so our advantages, crops do mature faster. It is a more controlled environment. I will say that a lot of people, I think, say like there's no pests. I think the insect pests that we have tend to be things that can get through small spaces. Thrips, fungus gnats, whiteflies, well, aphids and ants. Because if you have a hydroponic lettuce, your consumer or yourself as a consumer, you may or may not be as comfortable with having ants, in your system. So, but I have found that unless it's a very tight, very, very well-maintained CEA, controlled environment ag system, there can still be pests. So, but they do mature faster. There can be water efficiency in the systems. And then if we look over on what we could say, I'll just pick one, disadvantages, because there's, I don't want to go through detail of every slide, but let's see. So disadvantages, let's pick 2. So monitor and balance the pH and the nutrient levels, the electrical conductivity daily. I'm not sure people do that daily, but it does take a lot of, maintenance. It's like a knowledge intensive system. Yeah. But so is soil production. Yeah. And take a look here. So crops to grow. This is where I'm curious about rare fruits, because I don't think of woody ornamentals or, my gosh, I mean, I don't know what of those rare fruits could go in a hydroponic system, but we want to think about the roots, how they would do in that inert media support. But the leafy greens are very much known. So we have varieties of lettuce and spinach and bok choy, mustard greens, kale, Swiss chard. One could experiment with this. And then herbs. And if you go to like in stores, we'll see that howlings is a big production for tomatoes, hydroponic tomatoes. So when you see those, hopefully now you can think that's likely in sort of, I'm guessing like a Beto bucket. It's a bucket and it's got the big, or it could be NFT, but it's got the vining. So yeah, so so vegetative crops though, those are very good for hydroponics. Fruiting crops can be done. And I liked what you're talking about is the gourd fruit, and all of that. There's like the botanical fruit, there's the culinary fruit. But hydroponic tomatoes, I was just mentioning howling. So those can be very successful. Bell peppers can be, I would say, I don't know, these seem like they would take maybe a little more experience, but maybe, I don't know, what do you grow for hydroponic, the fruiting crops? Anyone? Well, like, or what are you growing, those that do grow hydro here? Lettuce? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's what I would start with, and that's what I've done with with our students. But look what you can do, like cucumber and even strawberries. And we did see radish in one of those first pictures, which I wouldn't usually think of. But yeah, so these are some things that can be done. Do's and don'ts, you want to choose relatively compact crops because they do have a pretty small footprint. I mean, you could have a big, large greenhouse with tons of, a lot of NFT, a lot of plants growing. But I mean, the actual plant is rooted in an inert medium. There's no cation exchange capacity. There's no organic matter for the most, so it's a relatively compact. And you have to think about your space. And as you can see here, shallow root systems can be easier to grow. And then those taller plants that vine are going to take more maintenance as well. And then when you're done with the crop, I mean, I guess it depends on your scale, but taking that all down as well. So what we've done at Cal Poly Pomona too is we've grown hydroponic tomatoes. This was before all of our student cohort here. When I first started, we had a lot more tomato production. But in the winter, we would grow in the greenhouse, and in the summer, we would grow in the field. So, yeah. So, I like that first line as I put this together. You could grow things hydroponically, but it doesn't mean you should. You just want to be intentional with your, and you know so much about the plants and things that you grow. I mean, some plants are too delicate, others take too long to grow. And then, the indoor plants, we may need LED lights, temperature control, and all of that. So just wanted to mention, I won't read through all this necessarily, but sanitize is really important as a pest and insect person, as an entomologist. Well, I guess I would say first that you will spend time disinfecting your system. We've experienced in our cooling pads, this is not directly related to hydroponics, but algae growth. Another thing we're replacing, we have older cooling pads. And so we've had to sort of, spend a lot of time cleaning those, trying to get a bleach solution in there. I mean, they're pretty time intensive to try to get a good airflow through. But then the hydroponic system itself, if you have a plant disease, you can have to, really find out if it's, waterborne or if it's a powdery mildew, we'll get that in the greenhouse. And I'm not going to talk about aquaponics per se today, but that becomes a little more complicated and complex because even if we're using Organic Material Review Institute listed insecticides, they may not be compliant with aquaculture, with fish, and with our standards that we have for fish health. And so that's made it challenging as well. So a lot of times we've just done sanitation and physical control, and we have even taken things out and started over and done a really good cleaning. And we have used a small ppm of, bleach to kind of try to clean things up. Yeah. So this is very customary. It's called, cultural sanitation, pest control, getting rid of our even just weeds that can be, we have gravel floors for the most part in our greenhouses at the campus. And so we do have, that's a bridge, or it can be for, an insect like a thrips that can be, thrips carry tospovirus. And thrips are, this is a little factoid, but the insect thrips, when the mother thrip has say a tobacco mosaic or one of these tospoviruses, it'll be actually transferred to her offspring within the body. It's called, I think it's called, I can't remember the term. I just had it, but so it's just that you can have some lamb's quarter, some different things growing on out of your gravel on the ground, and then that could interact with the thrips. And well, I was just giving an example of like lamb's quarter, a weed or something. Yeah. So yeah, so just some thoughts that think my main point is just that it is kind of easy, but there's a lot of complexity to it. So think of it like a pest manager. I would say that most systems are not like super like what we see on the news or the BBC. They're not so, those where you see they're playing music for their plants and it's like super nice and it's just very like tightly controlled. I mean, we have weeds growing on the floor and we have, or, in the gravel, and we don't always have the best insect screens. And, as an entomologist, it's like, oh, those thrips can get in. And yeah, so it's still a very interesting system to work in. And then as a grower and a consumer, we just have our own, and a plant people, if we're not growing commercially, we have a different, I don't want to say aesthetic standard, or it's very nice to be able to grow your own in that system. It's pretty special. So some things I hope people wouldn't think too much about. I spent a lot of time in cornfields in the Midwest, and that's not a good one for hydroponics for kind of obvious reasons. It just gets, but vine crops, good ones are tomatoes and cucumbers. What I'd like to do, does anybody have anything they want to add or questions? I just wanted to say a few things about recipes and then tell you about our students. So yeah, but I turn it over to you. Yeah. Yep. The question was a question about the water, because you need the water. And actually, I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that. So I'll just put up one slide as a background here. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all these. So the water is really important. So it's depending, you asked about like, is it recirculating? Is it from a well? I could add, is it municipal? Is it, how is this water? Good systems like that, people use reverse osmosis to get, some hydroponic systems use that. So the water is a place that you start actually growing hydroponics. And so that was perfect timing. You want to be aware of your water in terms of its alkalinity, its electrical conductivity, the dissolved salts. We have some nitrogen in our water at Cal Poly Pomona. There are other salts like sodium. And so those are going to be part of the electrical conductivity readings. EC is put a meter into that solution, and it's like electrical conductivity. There are these salts in the water, and this is very elemental the way I'm explaining this, but I'm sure many of you could explain it better. But basically, it's going to have a read of how much concentration of these dissolved salts. Fertilizer, we're thinking about the nutrient. So yeah, the water can have some nutrients. It can also have some things that might make it more challenging to grow, and they can have concentration of specific elements. But what did you want to?
Have you been getting funds from NASA, hydroponics?
Mhm.
And the second part is US Navy.
Mm.
is thinking about installing hydroponics or nuclear submarines. What is your research on that?
Yeah. So the question was that hydroponics is making a splash in terms of and NASA and they've been funding research on hydroponics, like to have on Mars and to have on space missions. It would be kind of a dizzying thing here, but I'm gonna, the very last slide, I have a great example of that. We are not getting funding ourselves, but there is in aerospace, I don't, there is a student club that is connected to this. So I could get back to you on that. Plant science currently does not have funding from aerospace or for hydroponics in those settings. But you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is something that's being looked at. I don't want to give away the last slide because it's so cool. It's one of our graduates. Yes. Right. So that is the fish system that is aquaponics. And so it is exactly as you say, you've got a hydroponic. A lot of times people don't think about it. Like, I like how you said that. Your friend had fish in their hydroponic system. It's not aquaculture because that's just fish on its own. But it is a hydroponic system. And but your fish are there in separate tanks, and they have, this is actually it's a closed system. The fish, as you may know, their waste is providing nitrogen to the plants within the hydroponic system, but it's very specific way to channel that. That way that the fish are not in their own, high nitrate level. They're okay if they're managed properly. And then the plants are receiving nutrients from this organic matter. So yeah. Yes.
Two of your slides, I noticed cost being an disadvantage.
Yeah.
Side.
Mm.
How much would it cost to get in, if you know nothing, to get in for a beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the cost, should I wrap it up? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. The question was like, so I really like that question. The question was cost. Cost could be a negative. And then, or you were asking like, if you're just starting out, what if you wanted to do those beta buckets in your backyard, or, you could set up an NFT, or a lot of people get towers, grow towers with the air mist inside. I don't know the exact figures. It would be, if it was a small system, maybe George or others, please would know, but you're talking about your recipe, your structure, I was like, yeah. Yeah. $60? I don't know. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So do you ever, yeah. Have you used those? Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yep. Yeah. So I think it's not that expensive. I mean, for small scale, but it's like for those larger scales, it can, yeah. It's such a continuum, I think. Oh, for those larger, I would say thousands. I mean, for those big systems, for like Howlings, the tomato producer. But I think it's quite doable. Yeah. And I made that comment about food grade. I don't really know how one would exactly get a food grade bucket. But a food grade bucket, I mean, I think if the roots are in that plastic surrounded by that nutrients, I mean, the edible part is not, exposed to it.
So back to aquaponics. So the fish waste produces the nitrogen that the plants need, right? How about all the other nutrients? Where do those come from in an aquaponic system?
Yeah. So is it okay if I show you a couple of pictures if I just scoot through? So I do want to just say I love that question about the water, because like start with your water. So as well as you're asking starting at home. And this, I have a little link there, but you can Google water testing for hydroponics. I should have the price, but I don't have it at the top of my head. But you want to see what's in your water already. Like you said, where is it coming from? Does it have a lot of calcium? Does it have a little bit more nitrogen? Does it have sodium or things like that. So I want to show you that one could get much into that, the water, but think about, so I'm not gonna, you know, I'll make the slide set available for part of a much more detailed, lecture. I do want to stress that hopefully you can leave here knowing that electrical conductivity is a measure of total dissolved salts. It's a way to measure your nutrient levels, but the thing is, it doesn't tell you what they are. You get a nutrient, so, and there's different recipes for different crops, and a electrical conductivity can be measured in, for example, parts per million. I just want to show you a slide with a recipe. And so I think it's right here. So you can see that you can have these different nutrients, but when you do an EC rating at the very bottom, it's a little small, but so let's say for a tomato recipe at different phenologies, so from 0 to 6 weeks, like seedling, pre-reproductive, and then I would say week 6 to 12 is like flowering, and then getting towards maturity, week 12 and plus. So down at the bottom, just a quick little thought. So you've got slightly different electrical conductivity ratings that are desirable, and there's a range. This MS stands for millisiemens, SIEMENS. And so that's just your meter will have that rating on it, or it can be parts per million. So you just have to know what you're reading, what your units are. But you can see that there's these ranges. So just long story short, or what I've always found interesting. So here's 2.5 to 3.0 millisiemens for this EC rating. And that is like, that's good. I'm in my nice, that's a good amount of total dissolved, a good concentration of nutrients, of fertility in the water, except that what you put in for your recipe originally is what you know is in there. It's not going to tell you, I have this much nitrogen, I have this much phosphorus. That's just something I've always found interesting. And then I wanted to show you a picture here. So if you'll forgive me, I'm just gonna, oh, good, here's one. Okay, so I wanted to show you Tim Rice, and then we'll get to our aerospace. So the aquaponics question. Okay, oh, I keep doing that. Okay, let's just wait. Okay, so Tim Rice is there on the left. This is when our greenhouse was in all its glory before we are, doing our repairs. But really, and I wanted to ask our students, did you ever see this system as is? Okay, it's not quite there right now. But one thing I want to point out, so what Tim did for his master's degree, and he's actually from Orange County. And he went to Orange Coast College, I think, and he had funding from the California Farm Bureau, the OC. And so what he did, he's up in our greenhouse, 3 tanks of these tilapia. And so you asked about the other nutrients. So what Tim would also balance, he's really, really good. He would balance also magnesium. He would look at, I think it was magnesium and maybe calcium, but most of the nitrogen, all of it would come from this. But we did find our water levels were higher in nitrogen than ideal. And so then they kind of tried to adjust that. But something that Tim did was his thesis was on taking the sort of the waste, the fish are in there we still have a couple tanks, one tank, and they'll just flop around. They see you coming, and we had an underwater camera. But what he did was he basically filtered off and composted some of the recirculated waste. So I would say that it's, from my experience, I'm a field crop entomologist in my training. And so I was always thinking about soil, plant available nutrients, soil test, credits from the last year with nitrogen and so on. I felt in my experience that soil-based agriculture was a little bit more calibrated. It's not exact, but I liken this sort of to, again, I'm worked in Wisconsin, so forgive me, but they would put out slurry. So it's from all those dairy lagoons, and you're driving and, and so that's just like sprayed out in the field, but it's not as an exact, there's a lot of nutrients in there, and they can take some samples, but it's not like you're adding this much phosphorus. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems to be an art and a science in my experience. Now, Tim is now at Purdue University. He is an aquaponics technician, and I understand, I think it's a 5-year, 10 or some millions of dollar grants, a sustainable agriculture system grant. And we're so proud because the principal investigator interviewed people, lots of people applied. I don't know how many, and they chose our Cal Poly Pomona right here from Orange County. So yeah, I mean, so that's my experience. That's my thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Joan also is interested in organically growing hydroponically. Is there a way to do that?
Yes. So we'll end with Lillian in a bit. So hydroponics and organics is such an interesting thing. I would share with you that it was controversial in the National Organic Program and the organic standards. Because if you think about the genesis of certification for organic, just sidebar, I also trained to be an organic inspector. I never did it because I came to Cal Poly. I was making like a career transition, and we wanted to move from Wisconsin, and we're like, oh. And so I did get my training on this, but then I got my job at Cal Poly. So I don't have any time to do organic inspecting, but it was very interesting. So there was a lot of contention. You can look it up, and it was like, okay, well, organic is soil-based, and that was so much a part of and nutrient cycling based on soil health and everything. And so you can grow hydroponics organically. And I believe I'm 98% certain, I'd have to look it up, but that it is part of the organic regulation. It is actually. I'm only hedging because Liam, you were saying, how I can relate to you saying like, I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to not, like you were saying. So even though I know that, I'm sort of hesitating just because I don't know all the little details off the top of my head. But yes, you can grow hydroponics organically, and it is going to be dependent on the inputs that you use for your recipe. So what some people have said, and I've not experienced it myself, but that it can be kind of smelly, but I think that's probably been worked out. I mean, you have big companies that are doing this, and what Tim was doing in the last slide, he was trying to sort of compost or kind of take that into some of that fish waste into a nutrient that actually Lillian then used here. This is Lillian Wang. She was one of my master's students. And she used that waste from the aquaponics system that was kind of like very like, it was essentially anaerobically processed. So I don't know if you'd call that composting really. She used that in her sumps to grow her sump tank. That was her recipe. It did not smell or anything. I guess it was technically organic, although this was a kind of little home system in the greenhouse. But then that was her nutrient in her bok choy that she grew. And we had a couple different treatments. But Lillian, this blows my mind. Lillian Wang, plant scientist at Kennedy Space Center with Bennett Aerospace Incorporated. She is doing hydroponics for these types of, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, so your comment was about how the Los Angeles metropolitan is always fascinating to me. Our greater LA basin, its metropolitan areas are not per se, right? They're not agriculturally zoned anymore. They were. Adriana, you spoke about that. I know you're from San Jose, and you spoke about that so elegantly. Thank you for that. But what my agricultural side too, we're ringed by Ventura and Oxnard and a lot of production, but then in cities. So I think you were saying that you've seen figures of like 40% might be indoor ag. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think when I first came to Cal Poly Pomona, it was being talked about a lot. And I think it does make for some resilience to a food system. We'll see. Have you heard of Plenty? Do you see that? Have you ever been in the grocery store and seen Plenty? It's a hydroponic, robotic, it's a whole system in Compton. And I know I'd have to see how they're doing, but we've been to some of their programs and their opening. It'll be interesting to see how it does. Yeah.
I just have one other question. Regarding greenhouses, are they transplanting tissue culture in these greenhouses?
Yeah.
Growing at Cal Poly.
Well, right now we do have a tissue culture class. We are not bringing those into our greenhouse. Like I said, I mean, you should all come. We should have a tour when we get our new shade cloth and everything. We would love to have you when we have our systems back up and running. Right now at Cal Poly Pomona, we have a wonderful instructional lead named Duncan McKee. And Duncan and our new professor, Dr. Guadalupe Maldonado Andrade, are co-instructing our tissue culture class. And they're doing, of course, dragon fruits, and they're also doing some medicinal plants that have, I guess, cancer, inhibiting types of compounds that are being researched. So we were just looking, actually, I don't know, students, do you know, we have this little tissue culture lab right off of, Susan remembers, right off of 202. It's a small room. We should come and see. You can see little tubes and they're starting to grow. So we do teach our students that, thanks to Duncan and Dr. Maldonado Andrade. But I haven't seen it in our greenhouse, but although we could, like with dragon fruit. I'm not sure where we get I'll have to ask Kelsey, because we have a mail order dragon fruit program. It started during the pandemic, but we're not doing it from tissue culture. I'll have to see where she gets that stock.
I have a question regarding the yields that you produce. It's on, I can hear it. Have you done a comparison with the nutritional value that's grown through the hydroponic system and to a system, for example, that's grown in a permaculture type of environment where you're talking healthy soil, you've got the in addition to the minerals and the nutrients, vitamins and so forth, but you also have the life forms that are providing. Exactly. I mean, especially now with all the advancement in science now with our own bodies, that they're finding out that the microbiome is so important with everyone's health. And I think that's true with the life of the plants as well.
I really love that question. And did everyone hear it okay? So just briefly, this question and thought and this construct of, well, first of all, we have not. So the question was, have we done any nutrient testing for nutrient density, phytocompounds, different, compounds of the plants that are grown hydroponically as compared to grown in a soil system? And in particular, you were talking about a kind of a very organic or healthy soil,
Permaculture
yeah,
work.
yeah. So we haven't, but that's something that I think you are speaking to, the nature of how it was so contentious in the organic movement and the organic regulations, that there was a lot of pushback to have organic hydroponics because it was lacking any of the microbial or the, soil. Lillian did include vermicompost as one of her hydroponic treatments. But even that was like one, I mean, that's great. It was very interesting, but it still lacked the soil interactions. So I think those studies can be difficult sometimes too, because they're probably, a lot of times what people do in science is they'll do meta-analysis, where they take as many studies that could speak to that and kind of homogenize them, you're kind of comparing apples to apples. But there was a big Stanford study, maybe even a decade ago, on just that in soil for organic and conventional, let alone, like you said, organic and soil less and soil. So it's a great question, and yeah, but I don't have a good answer.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I do feel like, I mean, without the soil, it's a whole different system.
Right. Because your output is only going to be as good as what your input.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thus the controversy around getting a certified hydroponic tomato. Not everyone's happy about that. Do we trim the roots within those buckets and things? No. They stay kind of like contained. And I remember our former greenhouse manager, she's retired, Monica Salambier. She'd pull up the lid of the bucket and it was just like this mass of white roots. And it was just they've been in there for 3 months and producing all these tomatoes. It was really, at that time, really new to me. Yeah.
How practically do you add the micronutrients and get them in the right amount?
Practically speaking, we have people like you saw on the last slide, Tim Rice from Orange County, who's at Purdue now. So the, I would lean on someone else for that, but practically, so they know the crop, they know the nutrient needs of the crop, and then they have a dosing system. So long story short, this is very general, but there's going to be recipes for different crops. There are hydroponic recipes that can serve many crops. But I think if you're growing tomatoes versus spinach or kale, your nutrient mix is going to be different. But all I can say is that's fascinating to me that you can take an EC reading. You've got electrical conductivity in the range you want. You put this ratios of nutrients in originally. Some of that water evaporates. We top it up a little and it still does okay. I mean, it sounds like people have knowledge of this, but to me, it's yeah, like I don't,
I
yeah.
assume you don't do them individually, but
Mm.
you probably have various substances that contain.
Yeah, this brings to mind something we also do is you also monitor the pH and whether it's alkaline, more basic or acidic, that also heavily or significantly influences the nutrient availability of those nutrients in the solution to the plants. So it could, if it's too basic, the plants aren't going to see those nutrients even though they're there, or vice versa. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's another factor, the pH. Yeah.
Got about 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have time for any more questions or want to wrap up?
What's the idea of pH?
Oh, why is pH part of this? How does it, is that what you're? Oh, well, what is the pH you should aim for? It's often like 6 point, yeah, 6 point, I want to say 6.5 to 6.8. I don't know. What do you think? Or others? George? I have it on my slides too. Yeah. And when we teach that, so I think, that's not, it's kind of right down the middle. It's not, it's, but that's so fascinating, even with what I'm experiencing, soil agriculture, the plants don't see everything, even that's in soil solutions. So the pH is, yeah, so right around that mid-6 range. Some crops might be 6.3, some might be 6.8, but that tells you, so that's what hydroponic people do. They monitor their pH very frequently. I don't know if you do it daily, but these big operations probably do. And you look at your electrical conductivity. And if your pH goes out of that range, you know that your plant roots aren't gonna be able to take up what's there. Also, you don't want your nutrients to precipitate out of solution. And I believe that can also be tied to pH. So they'll just kind of like, I don't even know if we would see it. Maybe people, I don't know if you can see it. Like, when you have hard water in your water kettle, I don't know if it's like that, but you want to keep everything in solution in a pH range. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, it's very interactive like that. I think there's a lot of experience that goes into doing this. I don't have all those nuanced experiences, but hopefully I'll get some practice.
You seen your big slide at the end yet? Oh, okay,
I mean,
okay.
it
I
was
wasn't sure.
Tim and Lillian.
Oh, okay,
mean,
all the whole
was
tie-in to
Lily-
Kennedy Center. Okay,
Yeah, and
very
Tim
cool.
being at Purdue, being selected. I mean, yeah.
That's
So
really neat.
Cal Poly, yeah. We're really, really proud of everybody. So, and thank you again for your support of our students, longstanding support. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.